All right, it is 1 o'clock on a Tuesday. Welcome to Office Half Hour, yay, where we will talk about what the heck is going on and answer some of your questions about time management and charting stuff and stuff. And I am going to, probably not successfully, but I'm going to try not to move my head too much today. And I just did it. And that's because for the first time ever, I am experiencing BPPV, benign paroxysmal positional vertigo. So I've treated plenty of patients for it, but now it's my turn to be in the patient chair. Literally. Oh my God, right? Like it's all these things that are so much more intense than we maybe give them credit for. I know in my case, I was rolling over in the middle of the night and flipped my hair out of the way, and all of a sudden felt like I was sailing off the edge of the effing world. It was intense. It was intense, intense. So I had some meclizine. When I fell asleep, woke up in the morning, it was still there. Had some meclizine, which definitely helped. Like it helped me kind of stay upright and not feel like things were so intense, but knocked me out. So that was fun. And later that night, I was actually speaking to a group of dentists about time management and charting and basically all these same things, right? Because we are more alike than different, and charting is something that unites all clinicians. So I was talking to them, and I don't know, clinically from their training, I don't know how much they really know about vertigo. I mean, if they've experienced it or someone they love has experienced it, then I just did it again, then they may have a better understanding. But I think they thought it was just dizziness. And this is pretty profound. And there's some fatigue with it too. So that's my update. That is what has been going on with me, and I'm not taking the meclizine anymore. The vertigo has improved, but it's not completely resolved. But the meclizine was just like, no, no. I'm really sensitive to CNS depressants, and um, that was like I felt like Rip Van Winkle, like I was gonna wake up with like this huge bushy beard. Right? So it wasn't worth it. So that's what's new with me. So for today, I've got a couple of things. I've got a question that was sent in that I'm going to answer. Reminder, feel free to send in your question. Just send me like a message. You can post it also in the group if you prefer, but you can send me a message with your time management question or something that you're struggling with that you'd like some feedback on. If you're able to make it in person, we can do some one-on-one with the group coaching, some live coaching if you would like that as well. But if you're catching this on the replay, which I realize a lot of folks are because we're all very busy, right? It's hard to sneak away for some time in the middle of the day. So if you are not able to make it at 1 p.m. Eastern time on a Tuesday, then it's fine to send me a question and we will kind of unpack it and dig into it a little bit during an upcoming office half hour. But beforehand, I guess I owe you guys a little bit of an apology because I wanted to do like a Nurses Week giveaway. And I thought, well, we're all here because of time management and charting and the challenges there. So I was like, oh, drop a comment with like how late you were charting right last night. And then I was like, oh, I don't feel that feels kind of icky. So I changed it and then ended up not giving away a copy of the book because I didn't get any answers. Womp womp. So maybe we'll do another giveaway, but just to give you a little primer and to give you some kind of like another form of tips in terms of time management, I'm going to read to you a little piece from the book, an excerpt from my book. So the book is called Secrets from the World's Most Productive Nurse Practitioner, and it's written by me. See right down there, that's me. And then on the back, that's me again. And I wrote the book, I'll tell you, well, I guess I'll tell you the brief version. I wrote the book just about 2 years ago, it came out. And I had always gotten like good feedback on my time management and like colleagues saying like, oh, I should follow you around for a day and kind of figure out how you do what you do. You always run on time and this sort of thing. And there was one day that I had a couple of minutes and I was messing around with the charting system, which was Epic at the time. And there's like some reports that you can run. And there was a report for, I don't know what it was called, but it was like basically a utilization report. And it showed for the previous 4 quarters how many, like what percentage of charts were closed the same day. So it had, when I ran the report for myself, it had my information and then it had an aggregate for the other providers in the practice. There were something like 30 or 35 other providers in the practice at the time. And they actually did pretty well, I think. Their average, and again, this is aggregate, so there were some people that did great, some people that were struggling, and then, kind of in the middle. But the average came in the 80s, so somewhere around 80% of the providers in this practice were closing their charts within 24 hours. So I call that same day. And that was impressive. So that's like this little graph. And then I saw my numbers. And for the previous 4 quarters, it was like 97 to 100% of the charts were closed same day. And I was like, oh, well, maybe there is something to this. So it's kind of a long story how it got to that point. I'll tell you the quick version. It was because I had to. I was working on another master's degree and I needed to be done at 5 p.m. So I kind of figured some things out, devised some tricks and tips and things like this, and got to a place where I never charted from home. I was out of there at 5 p.m. every day, and 97 to 100% of my charts for the previous 4 quarters, that's a year, were closed same day. So I sat down and thought, maybe I'll write like an article, write something and share what I do, what I don't do, and maybe I'll be able to help other people. And I started writing and I kept writing, and realized I had enough for a book. So the book came out just about 2 years ago. You can get it anywhere books are sold. So you can get it at your local bookseller, or you can get it on Amazon or wherever the heck. You can even get it directly from me if you like. But I want to give you just a little bit of a taste because I think that these are good takeaways. I hope you think they're good takeaways and helpful things. So chapter 10, working with a team. No one works in a vacuum. Most people work with other people at least some of the time. Most nurse practitioners work with a team of folks: secretaries, medical assistants, techs, nurses, nurse practitioners, physician associates, physicians, administrators. Everyone has a role to play, and everyone should understand their teammates' roles. I started a job once and met with the practice manager and scheduler, who were 2 different people. I asked them if they had an organizational chart that I could review so that I could get a sense of the different roles on the team and how they related to one another. They just sort of blinked at me when I said this. Completely true story. They had no idea what an org chart was, but they offered me a phone list, just a bunch of names and extensions, which didn't really mean anything to me in my first week. It was not a great sign. Managing, and just as importantly, protecting your time is a team effort. The outcome will affect the entire team. When you run late, they run late. When you run late and patients complain, those staff members end up hearing about it. Getting the rest of the team on board with helping to manage and protect your time as appropriate benefits everyone. Chatty Patty. Just as you need to know what to expect with certain patients, the same is true of rooming staff, who may have the largest direct influence on whether you run on time. Get to know for yourself who is a chatterbox and who rushes through rooming. I would take feedback on this from other providers and staff with a grain of salt. You don't know all the nuances of the history behind the feedback, so it's best to determine for yourself. If your office has assistants assigned to specific clinicians, you'll get an understanding of this a lot more quickly than if you're in an office that has a round-robin style of assistants and clinicians being paired up. But either way, once you get a sense for this, address any shortcomings or differing expectations of it as soon and as diplomatically as possible. So how can you handle it in the moment? If the person who's rooming your patient is taking more than 10 minutes to get it done, and this means you have to be paying attention, you have to watch them. You should knock on the door, wait a beat or two before opening it, thank them, and politely say you'll take it from here. If they were taking a long time to reconcile medications, but you know that won't be relevant to today's visit, why bother waiting? If it turns into a trend, and more than 3 times is a trend, a bigger discussion with the pertinent staff and their supervisors should happen to get to the bottom of the issue. Maybe there's a level of support the assistant needs that can help to address the issue. Maybe they're doing more than they need to because nobody told them any differently. Maybe a quick training would help with their efficiency. Maybe they should read this book. Keep in mind that you may be the first person to address this with this person. Conversely, you may be the latest in a long line of people to address this. Always approach with an open mind and genuine curiosity. There could be a good reason this is happening. The objective is to identify the root cause and create a plan, ideally together, to address the issue. RESCUE, to the tune of Aretha Franklin's Respect. She does RESPECT, so RESCUE. If you have a good working relationship with your rooming staff and you know that you have a patient coming in that might cause you to run over unnecessarily because you looked at your reference card, saw this patient had the codes that you came up with on your own for being a chatty patient, ask for a rescue knock. Have the staff knock on the door when the visit is scheduled to end and ask you to step out of the room. When you return to the room, let the patient know you'll have to end for today. You don't need to go into further detail. It works like a charm, but it can be difficult to pull off if you don't have a great relationship with your rooming staff. So this is another example of how investing in building the working relationship with your staff can be extremely beneficial. If you're both facing the same direction, it's a lot easier to address challenges. It's a setup. Make sure the staff that are rooming your patients know how you want patients set up for different kinds of visits. This will take an investment of time to address in advance, but it is worth it. Doing this will save you time in the long run, will make your work life and your teammates' work lives run more smoothly, and avoid unnecessarily duplication of efforts for a process that can easily be standardized. So give some thought to the following questions and think of any others that are unique to your practice that would be helpful to address in advance. 1, do you want all patients undressed and in a gown, or only some of them? If it's only some of them, which ones? Is it okay with you if the patient says they'll just drop their pants or lift their shirt when the time comes? Note that patients getting undressed adds time before you can even go into the room. And having staff ask you every time whether you want them to be undressed adds even more time. Here's another thing to think about. Do you want the staff to set up for a PAP, or is it easier for you to gather the materials for yourself when you need them? In that case, do you prefer to have supplies kept in the room when possible? And if so, which ones? How about, do you want staff to set up for biopsies or suture removals, earwax removals, that sort of thing? What specific items do you want for each of these types of visits? You may already have all the answers to these questions and be able to easily put together a nicely typed out list that staff could refer to. But realistically, you'll probably know a few of the answers to these questions and have to react to others as they arise. Plan to revisit this sort of question every few months or more often if needed, and really cultivate the relationship between you and your rooming staff. Book them. Make sure that the staff who books your appointments has a good understanding of what is and is not appropriate to book and when. If you are fortunate enough to have different lengths of visits, the shorter ones are best for follow-up on 1 or 2 simple or well-controlled conditions like hypertension or asthma, maybe acute concerns like UTIs, black and white visits like a suture removal, or a patient who's coming in mainly to request a referral. Your longer visits are better for physicals, follow-up for complex patient with 2 or more chronic conditions or poorly controlled conditions, visits that require interpreter services, new patient visits. Things like abdominal pain, chest pain, even in the context of a previous diagnosis, unilateral leg swelling, new onset shortness of breath should be booked no later than 3 hours before the end of the day. I had this happen all the time, and it was often like the last appointment. Though consideration should always be given to whether these patients are even appropriate for your clinical setting or whether they should be seen in an urgent or emergent setting, regardless of what time it is. And role models. Look around. Is there someone that you work with or you know who is a good role model for time management? How do they stay on track? What do they do? What do they avoid? Ask them for tips or to pick their brain, but never ask them on the fly. Set up a dedicated time. They'll appreciate it. So that is from Secrets from the World's Most Productive Nurse Practitioner. Hopefully that was some nice food for thought. If you have questions, if you have comments, if you have feedback, definitely drop a message below. I love to hear about that, and I love to like to make things better. So if there's anything about that that was like not clear, or you have questions, let me know. So speaking of the book, somebody who is has read the book said, I read your book, you've got some great advice, but I have a question. When do you chart? I know you don't pre-chart, you don't chart in the room, and you don't chart at home, so I'm not sure when you chart. That's an excellent question. So I feel very strongly about not pre-charting. I have a lot of reasons for it. One of the reasons that I don't like to pre-chart is because things change. So pre-charting, what I mean by pre-charting is when you've got that patient on your schedule coming in at 1:30 and it's, 3-month follow-up for hypertension, right? You just want to basically make sure that the blood pressure is well controlled and maybe adjust the medication dosage or change medications if they have like a cough, right? ACE inhibitor cough, that kind of stuff. So it's so tempting because it looks like, oh, this is going to be so easy. I'm going to start my note before they even come in. I'm gonna put like a refill for the medication in. I might not sign it, but I'll tee everything up. It'll be ready to go. I will start writing the actual note, and it's gonna be beautiful. So all I have to do is see the patient, then we're done, and I'll like add a couple of little things, sign it, and be done, right? So it really, really is tempting as a way to be efficient. And I have seen it backfire so much. Rarely, once like one time out of 100 have I seen this with colleagues. I don't do it because I've seen it go wrong so many times. Like one time out of 100, it actually works the way that you envision it, right? All the other times, something goes wrong. So the patient doesn't show up. Now you've got an open note in your system, and you have to figure out how do I close this note. Sometimes I've had people like have to call IT to get this note closed because the patient never showed up, so they didn't even check in. And how do we do this? And nobody knows. And they don't really teach you that part when they're training you how to use Epic, right? Um, I've seen it also much more often be the case that the patient shows up for this appointment that's scheduled that was supposed to be a follow-up for, um, like a 3-month follow-up. But now, like, they've got like gout or something, like their toe is on fire. They don't give a shit about their hypertension. They want to figure out what is going on with this toe. Is this gout? Is this broke toe? Is this an ingrown toenail that's infected? Is this cellulitis? Like, we have to kind of dig into this, no pun intended. And the hypertension stuff they're going to come back, in another week or two, and we'll get to that. So all of the work that you did to set up that note is a waste of time, right? Because you're just going to throw it all out because now you're focused on whatever is going on with this toe and really not doing anything about the hypertension at this visit, right? The focus changed. The other piece that goes along with that is when you've done this pre-charting and you've set all this stuff up, right? And so you're like, oh yeah, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to put these orders in, right? So maybe you want to do like a CMP, right? You want to make sure they're not having any problem with their kidney, their liver, everything's good there. But then they come in for, gout or something. Well, they might not get that blood work done, or they come in for, you'd get blood work for that. Maybe they come in with shoulder pain, right? And so you're treating acute shoulder pain and you're referring them to PT. Well, they never get that blood work done. Then they end up in the lab for something else. That blood work gets drawn, 6 weeks later. It shows up in your inbox. What the heck is this? Why am I getting a CMP on John Doe? You have to go through all of these layers to kind of figure out, why did this show up in my inbox? What is this? Is this normal? Is it not normal? Why did I order it in the first place? All of that, such a waste of time. Huge waste of time, right? And the labs, like if they come in, because I've had this happen to me a bunch of times, if the labs come in like 6 weeks later, they're kind of not really clinically relevant anymore, right? Especially if you were seeing them for something acute. Maybe if it was for like an annual physical or follow-up of a stable condition, yeah, maybe you could kind of go with those labs. But in a lot of cases, by that point, if it's 4 or 6 weeks later, it's not really relevant to whatever you did see them for. So all the effort that you put in to pre-charting for that visit, that you put into teeing up lab work, maybe medications, all this stuff ended up being really for nothing, right? Because the focus shifted or the patient didn't show up or whatever the case may be. So I don't pre-chart, and I recommend that you do not pre-chart either. And instead, do the work that you actually have. So if you've got time that you would have devoted to pre-charting, instead devote it to actual work that you actually have. So looking at lab results that you have in your inbox, right? Like those are definitely there. Result those. Are they normal? Are they not normal? Do whatever you have to do. Respond to patient messages, like things that are actually that still will need to get done. Because if you do the pre-charting, all of those things are still there, right? All of those, the work that you actually have is still there waiting for you. Now, instead of addressing those, you've kind of invested time in the hopes of it being beneficial in the long run. It's a gamble, usually doesn't work out, so don't do that. I don't like to chart in the room with the patient. I don't feel comfortable having the computer between me and the patient. I like to talk to the patient. I like to see the patient. I like to be able to observe the patient for, body language, nonverbal cues, and also for like the reason that they're there. If somebody comes in for abdominal pain and they can't stand up straight, like that's telling. Likewise, if somebody comes in for abdominal pain and they can hop right up onto the exam table with no limitations, that could be telling too. That can help with the clinical assessment. So I don't like to chart in the room. A lot of people do, and it works well for them and it helps with their time management. So if you feel comfortable and it is helpful, it's beneficial, then it's worth doing. For me, it isn't. So I don't pre-chart. I don't chart in the room. I never chart from home. That is a promise that I made to myself years and years and years ago, and I have completely kept that promise to myself. So when do I chart? I find pockets of time is the answer, right? So you may have a no-show patient. You can knock out a couple of charts with that. I may have a visit that is a quicker visit, didn't take the full amount of time. Just because you have 20 or 30 minutes on the schedule doesn't mean you need to use all 20 or 30 minutes. If you have a visit like a UTI, those usually don't, if you have longer visits, if you have a patient come in for a UTI in a 30-minute slot, you're not going to need that full 30 minutes. Most of the work is going to happen before you're even in the room. You're going to have your rooming staff get a urine sample and dip it and give me the results before I even go in, right? So, and in most cases, in my experience, most UTIs are UTIs, right? Patients that come in with all the symptoms like frequency of urination, pain with urination, burning with urination, no new sexual partners or anything like that. It's pretty cut and dried, classic UTI, and you give them some antibiotics and maybe have them come back. Send the urine off for culture, right, which is also going to happen by somebody else. That's not something that you're really even going to have to do. So the visit itself, I love UTIs because they're quick and it gives me time to get other things done. So when you have those visits on your schedule, those are opportunities, right? When you have a no-show, that's an opportunity for charting. When you have quicker visits, or even if you are saving the last, I recommend saving the last 5 or so minutes, depending what the length of the visit is, for charting, because that's the work that you do with the patient, right? There's no reason that you can't stop 5 minutes early so that you can do the charting before you move on to your next patient, so that you can dump the really important information that you don't want to forget or you don't want to have to carry around in your head for the rest of the day. If the first patient that you see for the day, say you have 20 patients in a day, and like your first or second patient comes in for a sprained ankle, and you need to remember which ankle was it? Was it the medial side or the lateral side? If you have to carry that information in your head for the whole day or even until like midday or the end of the session, and then that's like the first patient, and then the next patient, next patient, next patient, every patient you see has some little fragment of detailed information, right? You want to dump that into the note at the end of the visit before you go on to the next patient, because it's going to save you time, it's going to save you headache, it's going to save you heartache, and it's going to save you energy, because you're not having to like keep that little bit of information in your brain and like literally carrying it around like baggage all day. So I look for opportunities. It's kind of almost like playing a video game, where you're like, oh, if I do this move, I don't know, I'm not a big video game person, but Pac-Man or something, that's my era. If I'm going this way, and I'm, gobbling up the little things, but I'll go this way because then I can turn around this way and I'll be able to get, close the loop, or I'll get the other missing pieces there. That's like that strategic thinking that you can apply that same kind of thing to the way that you approach time management and charting, right? So it's not about just saving it off for the end of the session or the end of the day and bringing everything home. You need to dump out those little pieces, clear your mind before you go into the next patient. Also, that is going to benefit your time management over time, your time management approach. So that's what I do, right? I don't save it. I kind of if I can get the whole thing done in the moment, then I do that. Like if it's a simple visit, if it's a less simple visit, but there are some really specific details that I'm afraid I might not remember, or I might have difficulty remembering and it's going to take me longer to write the note, then I'll also dump those into the note before I go on to the next patient. It's all fine. You're allowed to do that. You are in the driver's seat as a clinician, and it's okay for you to do that. I think that we don't get that message really, that it's okay for us to do that as clinicians, and it's okay for us to make these executive decisions and these judgment calls, right? Maybe we think that we can only make the judgment call when it comes to like clinical things, right? Like which antibiotic am I going to choose, or which diagnosis am I going to use for my list of differentials, and what is my follow-up plan going to be? Will I have them come back in a week? Will I have them do a telehealth visit? Will I just wait to hear from them if things go wrong? How am I going to approach that? I think sometimes we feel that those are the decisions we're allowed to make. And those are yes, that's true. But there are a lot of other decisions that we're allowed to make as well. And I think that when we can embrace that and we can kind of take that approach of being in the driver's seat and making some decisions and then like infuse that with strategic thinking, that's where we can up our time management game and our strategy. And that's how you get out of the office at 5 p.m. regularly with 97 to 100% of your charts closed. So this has been another Tuesday. I'm so glad that you're here. I'm so happy to answer these questions and to talk about these things. Please feel free, jump into the conversation, post on the group, send me a message, whatever you're comfortable with, whatever you're struggling with. Let's see what we can do to get to the bottom of it, right? And if you've sent a question in and I've answered it, and you still have like follow-up questions, you can absolutely send me that. That's why I'm here, right? I'm here with the goal of helping you. So if this is helpful, awesome. If it's not helpful, tell me how it could be more helpful, and we'll see what we can do. All right. So it's been another great Tuesday. I hope you had a great Nurses Week last week. If you didn't, I hope you know why you didn't have a great Nurses Week so that we can do something about it. I have some other exciting things coming up in the next week or two, so stay tuned to the page for that kind of stuff. And otherwise, I will see you next Tuesday. I will see you next Tuesday at 1 o'clock Eastern Time for office half hours, answering your questions, talking about time management, charting tips, all that stuff. All right, until next time, bye.